Mary Johnson was blocking a millionaire's limousine when everyone started filming. "Sir, please don't get in that car," she pleaded, her small black hands pressed against the gleaming hood. People nearby snickered at the absurdity until Mary repeated in flawless Spanish what she had just heard of his own bodyguards planning. Before we dive deeper into the story, please subscribe, like, and comment where you are watching from. I'd love to meet you. Now, let's begin. "Sir, please don't get in the car." John Evans froze when the child planted herself between him and the open door of his waiting limousine. He had just closed the waterfront development deal that would transform Miami's skyline forever. The last thing he needed was some street kid delaying his victory lap. "Move aside," he said firmly, adjusting his navy suit. "I have investors waiting." "No, sir, please." Mary stood her ground, chin raised with determination. "If you get in that car, you won't make it home. They're taking you somewhere else." Commuters on the sidewalk outside the downtown Miami Tower slowed to watch the scene unfolding. A white millionaire developer being blocked by a tiny black girl in scuffed sneakers and a faded school uniform. Phones came out, recording. "Is she asking for money?" someone muttered. "Kids will do anything for attention these days," another added with a smirk. Ruth came running, mortified. "Mary, for heaven's sake, what are you doing?" She turned to John, eyes downcast with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, sir. My daughter must be confused. We deliver empanadas to the building sometimes, and she gets carried away with stories." "I'm not confused, Mama," Mary insisted, still blocking John's path. "He can't get in that car. They're going to hurt him." The head of security approached with a practiced smile. "Mr. Evans, let us handle this. The girl probably watches too many crime shows." "Exactly," the second bodyguard agreed, holding the car door wider. "Dramatica. These kids and their imaginations." The crowd's laughter grew louder. The spectacle was drawing more attention, and John felt his patience evaporating as cameras captured his standoff with a child who barely reached his waist. "Enough," he said, motioning for security to move her aside. "I have properties to develop." But Mary didn't budge. She took a deep breath and switched to perfect Spanish. "No se suba al carro. Dijeron que hoy es el día, que lo van a llevar al almacén por el río." The laughter died instantly. Everyone stared at the little girl as if she'd transformed before their eyes. "What did you say?" John asked, his irritation replaced by confusion. "I understand Spanish," Mary explained, standing taller. "And I heard them talking." She pointed directly at his bodyguards. "They said once the door closes, you won't make it home. That there's a van waiting on 5th and Bay and a warehouse where no one will find you." The head of security forced a laugh. "Mr. Evans, this is ridiculous. A child making up wild stories." "I'm not making anything up," Mary countered, her voice steady despite her fear. "I was sitting on the stairwell delivering food when you walked past. You didn't even notice me. You said today was perfect, because everyone would be distracted by the deal." "Kid, you're confused," the second guard insisted, though his hand twitched toward his jacket. "And then," Mary continued, pointing at the head of security, "you said Raphael would be pleased, that everything was set up exactly like he wanted." A hush fell over the crowd. The bodyguards went visibly pale. "She speaks Spanish?" John asked Ruth, his voice completely transformed. "Yes, sir," Ruth answered, trembling. "Our neighbor, Senora Rivera, taught her. Mary picks up languages like they're nothing." John looked from his security chief to the second guard, then back to Mary. "Repeat exactly what you heard," he said, crouching to the girl's eye level. Mary took a deep breath and recited every word, every phrase from the conversation she'd overheard in the parking garage. As she spoke, John's expression shifted from skepticism to shock, then to cold fury. 8 years, he said, standing slowly, eyes locked on his head of security. You've been with me 8 years. Sir, this is a misunderstanding. 8 years, John repeated, voice hardening. You know my home, my schedule, my investments. I trusted you with everything. I've always protected you, Mr. Evans. A child who speaks Spanish fluently, and just repeated your exact words, John cut him off. Words about a warehouse by the river, about Raphael, about today being perfect. The crowd began backing away, phones still recording, but no one laughing now. The second bodyguard's hand moved decisively toward his concealed weapon. Tell me something, John said, stepping protectively in front of Mary. How would an 8-year-old know your plans unless you were actually plotting something? 3 days before she saved a millionaire's life, Mary Johnson was perched on a wooden stool behind the counter of Ortiz Bodega. Math homework hidden beneath a stack of receipts. Mija, can you restock the Goya beans? Mr. Ortiz called from the back room. The delivery just came. Yes, sir, Mary replied, carefully marking her place in the workbook. This was her after-school routine. Homework squeezed between stocking shelves, counting change, and listening to the steady stream of customers who flowed through the small store beneath their apartment. The bodega smelled of coffee, plantains, and the cleaning products her mother used during her morning shift before heading to her second job. Mary carried a box of canned beans to aisle 3, arranging them with practiced efficiency. 2 women chatted nearby, switching fluidly between English and Spanish. Y entonces me dijo que no podía pagar el alquiler este mes. Mary's ears perked up, absorbing their words. This was how she learned, catching phrases, memorizing patterns, building her vocabulary from the conversations that adults never realized she was cataloging. Mary Elizabeth Johnson, her mother's voice cut through her concentration. Ruth stood at the end of the aisle, still in her housekeeping uniform from the downtown hotel. Dark circles framed her eyes. I've been calling you for dinner. It's getting cold. Their apartment was 2 rooms above the bodega, a kitchen living area, and a bedroom they shared. The walls were thin enough that Mary could hear Mr. Ortiz's television through the floor. Ruth set down 2 plates of rice and beans with a small piece of chicken. How was school? Ruth asked, massaging her feet under the table. I got an A on my science project, Mary said. Ms. Williams said I should join the advanced program. Ruth's smile didn't reach her eyes. That's wonderful, baby. But remember what we talked about. Just blend in and stay safe, Mary finished. She'd heard it 100 times. Standing out meant trouble. Trouble meant attention. Attention meant risk. A knock at the door interrupted them. Senora Rivera stood in the hallway, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, a small bag of groceries in her arms. Ruth, Mary, I made too much flan again, she announced, though they all knew it was never an accident. The retired teacher had taken Mary under her wing 2 years ago, trading Spanish lessons for help carrying groceries up the stairs. ¿Cómo estás hoy, pequeña? Senora Rivera asked, setting the dessert on their counter. Estoy bien, gracias, Mary replied, her pronunciation perfect. ¿Usted? Muy bien, now. Shall we practice the past tense today? For an hour, Mary absorbed grammar rules and vocabulary, soaking up knowledge like the sponges her mother used to clean hotel bathrooms. Senora Rivera had been the first to notice Mary's gift for languages, how she could hear a phrase once and were repeated with perfect intonation, how she remembered every word as if photographing it in her mind. The morning after the tower incident, Mary woke to the sound of the television. Ruth sat rigid on their worn sofa, staring at the screen. Dramatic scene outside Evans Tower yesterday, when a young girl prevented what police are now confirming was an attempted kidnapping of real estate mogul John Evans. Shaky cell phone footage showed Mary shouting in Spanish, then police tackling the bodyguards to the ground. The caption read, "Child hero foils kidnapping plot." "Mama, that's me," Mary gasped. Ruth turned, her face tight with worry. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Everyone's looking at us now." "But I helped that man," Mary said quietly. "I know, baby." Ruth pulled her close. "I'm proud of you. But attention like this, it's not always safe for people like us." Across the city, John Evans watched the same news segment from his penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay. The reporter's voice echoed through his minimalist living room. Sources say the child, identified as 8-year-old Mary Johnson, overheard the security details speaking in Spanish about the kidnapping plan. Evans is head of security and another guard are now in custody. John muted the television, his hand trembling slightly. He'd spent the night giving statements to police, learning how close he'd come to disappearing. If not for that little girl, he made a decision. The black SUV looked out of place, parked outside Ortiz Bodega. Mary spotted it from the window while helping Senora Rivera with her English crossword puzzle. "Mama," she called, "someone's here." A man in a suit approached their door, his posture formal but unthreatening. "Miss Johnson, Mr. Evans would like to speak with you and your daughter, if you're available." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "Buena. He'd like to thank you personally. A car is waiting if you're willing." Ruth hesitated, looking from Mary to the expensive vehicle. "Rich men don't show up in our world for free," she whispered. "Please, Mama?" Mary asked. "I want to see if he's okay." The drive took them through neighborhoods Mary had only glimpsed on television, past gleaming high-rises and palm-lined streets where people jogged with purebred dogs. Mary pressed her face to the window, watching Miami transform from concrete and graffiti to glass and gardens. John's mansion sat on a private stretch of waterfront, protected by a gate and a new security team. The house itself seemed to be made entirely of light, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the ocean, white marble floors that echoed with their footsteps, artwork on walls tall enough to house their entire apartment building. John Evans met them in a sunlit room overlooking the water. Without his suit jacket, with his sleeves rolled up, he looked less intimidating, but more uncertain. "Mary," he said, crouching awkwardly to her level. "I wanted to thank you properly." Mary nodded, but her attention had already drifted to the massive bookcase along one wall and the illuminated globe in the corner. She walked to it, spinning it gently with one finger. "You like maps?" John asked, seeming relieved to have something to talk about. "I like knowing where places are," Mary replied. "Senora Rivera teaches me about different countries." John cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson, Ruth, what your daughter did. If she hadn't been there, I'd be gone. I can't just pretend that didn't happen." Ruth stood straighter. "We don't need charity, Mr. Evans." "It's not charity," he insisted. "It's—" He paused, searching for words. "It's an investment. In Mary's future." He outlined his offer. Tuition at Miami's best bilingual academy, help with their rent and Ruth's medical bills, a trust fund for Mary's college education. "No strings attached," he added. "I owe her my life." Ruth's hands twisted together, pride warring with the weight of unpaid bills and Mary's potential. We need to think about it. Mary traced the outline of Cuba on the globe, her eyes shining at the mention of a real school with language programs and science labs. That night, after Mary and Ruth had gone home in his car with promises to consider his offer, John poured himself a scotch and stood at his window, watching the lights of ships on the bay. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Evans," he answered. "Needed a niña from the barrio to save you, hermano." The voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of accent. It switched effortlessly between English and Spanish. John's glass froze halfway to his lips. "Rafael." "Been a long time, partner." Rafael Cortez's voice carried a smile John couldn't see, but remembered all too well. "Quite the spectacle on the news today." "What do you want?" John's knuckles whitened around the phone. "Just checking in, seeing how you're handling almost being, what's the word, disappeared." John stared out at the dark water. "It was you. Sleep well, John. Not everyone has a guardian angel listening in stairwells." The line went dead. John set down his glass and pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window. The attempted kidnapping wasn't the end. It was only the opening move. Mary stood frozen at the entrance to Biscayne Academy, clutching her new backpack. The school's limestone facade gleamed in the morning sun. Palm trees swaying along the circular driveway where luxury SUVs and sedans dropped off children in pressed uniforms identical to the one she now wore. 2 weeks after saving John Evans's life, Mary Johnson was starting her first day at Miami's most prestigious bilingual school. "You look perfect," Ruth whispered, straightening Mary's navy blazer. Her mother had taken the morning off from both jobs to be here, her hands still rough from cleaning products, but her face bright with pride. "Remember what I said?" "Just be myself," Mary finished, though she knew her mother was more worried than her smile suggested. "Exactly. And call me if you need anything." Mary nodded and walked through the heavy doors, feeling the weight of eyes following her. She recognized the whispers immediately. "That's her? The girl from the video. My dad says Mr. Evans is paying for everything." Her new classroom had floor-to-ceiling windows, ergonomic chairs, and interactive smartboards. Nothing like the overcrowded public school where desks were scratched with decades of initials and textbooks were held together with tape. "Class, please welcome Mary Johnson," her teacher, Ms. Delgado, announced. "Mary, would you like to introduce yourself?" Mary stood, hands clasped tightly. "My name is Mary. I'm from Little Havana." "Mary is joining our advanced language track," Ms. Delgado continued. "I understand you already speak Spanish quite well?" "Yes, ma'am. My neighbor taught me." During language period, Ms. Delgado asked Mary to read a passage aloud. Her pronunciation was flawless, her cadence natural. The teacher beamed. "Excelente, Mary! That was perfect." Some classmates looked impressed. Others exchanged glances. At lunch, Mary sat alone until a girl named Sophia joined her. "Is it true you saved a millionaire?" she asked, eyes wide. "I just told him what I heard," Mary replied, uncomfortable with the attention. "My mom says you're on all the Miami news sites," Sophia continued. "She showed me the video." That evening, Ruth let Mary use her phone to check her school portal. A notification from the class chat group appeared. Mary tapped it. "Why is the millionaire's pet in our class? Probably can't even afford lunch without Evans paying for it. Bet she made up the whole Spanish thing for attention." Mary closed the app, her stomach tight. She handed the phone back to Ruth without mentioning what she'd seen. "He's paying for everything, Carmela," Ruth confided to Senora Rivera the next evening. They sat at the small kitchen table while Mary pretended to read on the sofa. "School, rent, he even arranged for me to see a doctor about my back." Senora Rivera stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "It's a generous offer." "Too generous," Ruth said. "Men like John Evans don't just give money away." "Rich men don't always give from kindness," Senora Rivera agreed, lowering her voice. "Watch the strings, Ruth. Make sure you know what he really wants." Mary turned a page, listening intently. What did John Evans want? He seemed genuinely grateful, awkward but sincere. Yet something in Senora Rivera's warning resonated with the whispers at school. Ruth sighed. "I don't have a choice. You should see this school, Carmela. Mary deserves this chance." From her position on the sofa, Mary could see her mother's face. The worry lines softened. The perpetual tension in her shoulders eased for the first time in years. Whatever strings might be attached, the relief of paid bills had lifted a weight Mary hadn't fully understood until now. The invitation came a week later. Dinner at John's mansion. Ruth dressed carefully in her one good outfit, and Mary wore her school uniform, wanting to show John she was taking his opportunity seriously. The same driver who had taken them before held the car door open. "Mr. Evans is looking forward to seeing you both," he said. But when they arrived at the mansion, they weren't alone. A man Mary had never seen before stood by the window, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. He was handsome, with olive skin and salt and pepper hair at his temples, wearing an expensive suit that somehow looked more natural on him than John's ever did. "Ruth, Mary," John said, his smile tight. "This is Rafael Cortez, an old colleague of mine." Rafael turned, his smile reaching all the way to his eyes, but not warming them. "The famous Mary Johnson," he said, his accent subtle but musical. "What an honor to meet the girl everyone is talking about." Mary felt a chill despite the warm evening. Raphael's eyes never stopped moving, taking in exits, positions, reactions, like he was calculating something. "Raphael was in town unexpectedly," John explained, the strain in his voice obvious to Mary, if not to Ruth. "He insisted on meeting you both." Dinner was served on the terrace overlooking the bay. The table gleamed with silver and crystal. The food presented on white plates with artistic flourishes. Mary watched Raphael carefully, noting how John's posture stiffened whenever the other man spoke. "So, Mary," Raphael said, cutting into his steak with precise movements. "John tells me you have quite the ear for languages." "Yes, sir," Mary replied. "I like listening." "A valuable skill," Raphael smiled. "You never know what you might overhear, verdad?" The conversation flowed, but beneath it ran currents Mary could feel. When the adults thought she wasn't paying attention, the real dialogue emerged, especially when they slipped into Spanish. "Remarkable how you've reinvented yourself, John," Raphael said, his English polished, but his eyes hard. "The great philanthropist." "People change," John replied evenly. "Do they?" Raphael switched to Spanish. "O simplemente se vuelven mejores para esconder quiénes son realmente." Mary's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Or do they just get better at hiding who they really are? As the meal progressed, Mary pieced together fragments of a shared history. "Remember when we started Horizon Development?" Raphael asked. "Our grand vision for affordable housing in Little Havana?" John's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago. Before luxury condos became more profitable than helping communities." Raphael added, his smile never faltering. Later, when discussing a waterfront project, Elena always said that property had the best view in Miami. Raphael's voice softened on the woman's name. John's knuckles whitened around his wine glass. Elena made her choice. After you made yours, Raphael replied in Spanish, too quick for Ruth to catch, signing that contract without me. The tension built like a thunderstorm. Mary watched John trying to control the narrative to keep the conversation pleasant for Ruth's benefit, while Raphael methodically picked at old wounds. How fortunate you were, John, Raphael said as dessert was served, to have Mary intervene when she did. How close that day came to being your last. No. The threat hung in the air. Mary couldn't stay silent any longer. If you both wanted to help people, she asked suddenly, her clear voice cutting through the tension, why did it end like this? The table fell silent. John looked embarrassed, Ruth mortified. But Raphael's mask slipped. For just a moment, Mary saw raw pain beneath the polished veneer. An excellent question, pequeña, he said softly. Sometimes people who want the same things discover they're willing to take very different paths to get them. After dessert, Ruth took Mary to the bathroom. When they returned, the men had moved to John's study. Mary paused in the hallway, hearing raised voices. You think this makes us even? Raphael was saying. You stole everything. Our company, our vision, Elena. I didn't steal anything, John shot back. You walked away. The contract was expiring. What was I supposed to do? Wait for your partner, your friend, your brother. Raphael's voice dropped. The kidnapping was just to scare you, to make you negotiate. But now, you haven't changed at all. It's over, Raphael. The police know about your involvement. Raphael laughed, a sound without humor. You think I care about those guards? They're nothing. Next time, I won't need them. The city itself will tear you apart when they learn who you really are. Mary pressed herself against the wall as Raphael strode from the study. He paused, sensing her presence, and smiled without looking in her direction. Keep listening, pequeña, he said softly. You might hear even more interesting things about your new benefactor. After he left, Mary watched John through the doorway, his face in his hands. She understood now. The danger wasn't over. It had only changed form. 2 weeks after the tense dinner, John Evans sat alone in his study, staring at the handwritten note that had arrived that morning. One meeting. The Horizon Tower. Tonight at 8. Just you and me. I'll sign away all claims to our past ventures and disappear. This ends tonight. Are the Horizon Tower their first joint project, now an abandoned skeleton of concrete and steel after funding collapsed, along with their partnership. John rubbed his temples, exhaustion settling into his bones. Raphael's threats had escalated since their dinner, leaked documents to business reporters, whispers to investors, even a suspicious fire at one of John's construction sites. His new head of security, Martinez, stood in the doorway. It's a trap, sir. Obviously, John replied, still looking at the note. But it's also an opportunity to end this. At least let us shadow you. We'll stay out of sight, but close enough to intervene. John nodded. No direct presence. Raphael will spot a security team immediately. And the police? No, not yet. John stood, decision made. This started between Raphael and me. Maybe it needs to end the same way. Mary was helping Ruth fold laundry when John's call came. She watched her mother's face tighten as she listened. I understand, Ruth said. Yes, we'll stay home tonight. Be careful, John. After hanging up, Ruth sank onto the sofa. John's handling some business tonight. He wants us to stay in, just to be safe. Mary continued folding, but her mind raced. Something in her mother's voice didn't match her casual words. Later, she overheard Ruth on the phone with Martinez. Meeting Raphael at that abandoned building? Alone? Ruth's voice was hushed, but urgent. What if it's another kidnapping attempt? Mary froze, a half-folded shirt in her hands. I know your team will be nearby, but… Ruth paused. Please keep him safe. After Ruth went to take a shower, Mary found her phone and checked the recent calls. Martinez had texted an address. Horizon Tower, 8 p.m., team in position by 7:30. Mary knew what she had to do. When Ruth emerged from the bathroom, Mary pretended to be asleep. 20 minutes later, she slipped out the window onto the fire escape, her school backpack over her shoulder. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. The Horizon Tower loomed against the darkening sky, a half-finished monument to broken dreams. Construction had halted years ago, leaving 30 floors of exposed concrete, dangling wires, and plastic-covered openings where windows should be. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, but Mary found a section pushed down by trespassers and squeezed through. She spotted John's car parked near the temporary entrance. No sign of security. They were hidden, as promised. Mary circled the building, looking for another way in. A service door on the east side was propped open slightly, a cigarette butt still smoldering nearby. A careless guard. Mary slipped inside, the concrete stairwell dark and echoing. She could hear voices above, men speaking rapid Spanish, their words bouncing off bare walls. Está dentro. Cortés dice que lo llevemos arriba. He's inside. Cortés says to take him upstairs. ¿Cuánto tiempo tenemos? How much time do we have? Lo suficiente. Nadie sabe que está aquí. Enough. Nobody knows he's here. Mary crept higher, staying in shadows. The building's skeleton worked in her favor. Sound traveled clearly through the unfinished spaces. She could hear movement on multiple floors. Suddenly, the lights went out. Emergency fixtures flickered on, casting eerie shadows across exposed beams and piles of construction materials. Mary ducked behind a stack of drywall as footsteps approached. "Cell jammers activated," a voice reported in Spanish. "All exits secured, except the roof access." "Perfect," came the reply. "Take him to the 30th floor. Make it look like an accident. A fall during an inspection. The developer who died checking his failed project." Mary's heart pounded. She needed to warn John, but how? As the footsteps faded, she noticed something on the floor. A two-way radio, dropped by one of Raphael's men. She picked it up, hearing voices crackling through the speaker. "Equipo A, posición. Team A, position. Piso 15, subiendo. Floor 15, moving up. Equipo B, cubran la escalera este. Team B, cover the east stairwell." Mary took a deep breath and pressed the talk button. Mimicking the accent and cadence she'd heard, she spoke. "Equipo A, cambio de plans. Bajen al piso den. Creemos que está tratando de escapar por la salida oeste. Team A, change of plans. Go down to floor 10. We think he's trying to escape through the west exit." A pause, then, "Entendido. Bajando al 10. Understood. Going down to 10. Mary smiled. It worked. She continued, redirecting teams away from where she thought John might be. Equipo B, necesitamos refuerzo en la entrada principal. Posible seguridad externa. Team B, we need backup at the main entrance. possible external security. Equipo C, el objetivo se mueve hacia el piso 20. Intercepten. Team C, target moving to floor 20. Intercept. With each false command, she created confusion. Teams were reporting empty floors, questioning orders, doubling back. Mary moved higher, staying hidden, listening for John's voice. On the 25th floor, she heard him, arguing with someone. Raphael. Mary crept closer. Radio clutched to her chest. They were moving upward, toward the roof. She pressed the talk button again, this time whispering in English, "Mr. Evans, it's Mary. If you can hear this, go up, not down. They're waiting on the lower floors. Get to the roof." The rooftop was exposed to the night air, Miami's skyline glittering in all directions. John stood near the edge, facing Raphael. Wind whipped around them, fluttering their suit jackets. "It was supposed to be our legacy," Raphael was saying, gesturing to the unfinished building beneath them. "Affordable housing for families, not another luxury condo for the rich." "The numbers didn't work," John replied. "You know that. We would have gone bankrupt." "So you signed the redesign contract without me, cut me out completely. You disappeared for 3 weeks. The deadline was approaching. I was with my dying mother in Puerto Rico," Raphael's voice cracked. "You knew that, and while I buried her, you buried our partnership." John's shoulders sagged. "I made mistakes, Raphael, but this, kidnapping, threats, trying to kill me, this isn't justice." "No," Raphael agreed, stepping closer. "But it is poetic. The great John Evans falling to his death while inspecting his failed project." He gestured to the edge, the ultimate development disaster. In the distance, sirens wailed. Raphael frowned, checking his watch. "That's not possible. No one knows we're here." "Your men have been confused," John said, realization dawning. "Running in circles, reporting to different floors." Raphael's radio crackled. "Señor, hey policías, abajo. ¿Qué hacemos?" "Sir, there are police below. What do we do?" Before Raphael could respond, Mary's voice came through the speaker. "Todas las unidades, evacúen inmediatamente. Repito, evacúen. La policía ha rodeado el edificio. All units, evacuate immediately. Repeat, evacuate." Police have surrounded the building. Raphael's face contorted with rage. "You!" he shouted into the radio. "The little girl again!" Mary stepped out from behind an air-conditioning unit, still holding the radio. "They can hear you," she said calmly. "All of them. I've been redirecting your teams for the last 20 minutes. "Mary!" John moved toward her, but Raphael grabbed his arm. "Stay where you are!" Raphael snarled, pulling John dangerously close to the edge. "This changes nothing." Mary raised the radio to her lips again, switching to Spanish. "Atención a todas las unidades policiales. Están en el techo. Repito, están en el techo. Attention all police units. They are on the roof. Repeat, they are on the roof." Her voice echoed from multiple radios across the building. Raphael's men, thinking it was an official police broadcast, began shouting conflicting orders. "It's over, Raphael," Mary said. "Your men think the building is surrounded. Some are already running." Raphael's grip on John tightened. "You think you've won? A child with a radio?" The roof access door burst open. 2 of John's security team emerged, weapons drawn. "Police are on their way up, sir," Martinez called. Raphael looked from John to Mary. then to the approaching security. With a growl of frustration, he shoved John away from the edge and made a dash for the fire escape. He didn't make it 3 steps before Martinez tackled him to the ground. John rushed to Mary, kneeling before her. "What are you doing here? How did you—" "I heard Mom talking to Martinez," she explained. "I couldn't let Raphael hurt you again." Sirens grew louder. The police, alerted by the security team's calls, swarmed the building. Within minutes, the roof was filled with officers. Raphael, handcuffed and seething, locked eyes with Mary as they led him away. "Twice," he spat. "Twice you've interfered, Nina, with nothing but words." Mary watched him disappear through the door, her small body trembling now that the danger had passed. Instead of triumph, she felt strangely hollow. This wasn't like the movies. There was no swelling music, no neat resolution. Just a broken man being dragged away, and the weight of what might have happened pressing on her shoulders. As they descended the stairs, flashbulbs erupted from the street below. News vans had already arrived, tipped off by someone monitoring police channels. A dozen cameras pointed upward, capturing Mary emerging from the building with John. "Child hero saves millionaire again." She could already imagine the headlines. But as reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed, Mary felt something shift inside her. The real danger wasn't over. It had just changed form. "Mary, look this way." "Mary, how did you know to follow Mr. Evans?" "Mary, how does it feel to be a hero twice?" Camera flashes blinded her as John's security team escorted them through the crowd of reporters. Mary kept her head down, overwhelmed by the shouting and the lights. John's hand on her shoulder guided her toward the waiting car. "No questions tonight," Martinez announced firmly. "The child needs to go home." But the story was already breaking. By the time they reached Ruth's apartment, at Mary the hero was trending. Judith flung open the door, tears streaming down her face. "Mary Elizabeth Johnson!" She pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "Don't you ever disappear like that again!" "I'm sorry, Mama," Mary whispered. "But I had to help." Ruth looked over Mary's head at John. "What happened?" "She saved my life," John said simply. "Again." The next morning, Mary's face was on every local news channel. In an extraordinary turn of events, 8-year-old Mary Johnson has once again prevented an attempt on millionaire developer John Evans's life, a reporter announced outside the Horizon Tower. Sources say the child used a radio to confuse the would-be attackers and alert authorities. Another channel showed footage of Raphael being led away in handcuffs. The mastermind behind both attempts has been identified as Rafael Cortez, Evans's former business partner. Police credit the quick thinking of a little girl from Little Havana for foiling his plans. By afternoon, national networks had picked up the story. Headlines flashed across screens. "Little black girl from bodega saves millionaire. Twice." "Child hero speaks Spanish. Stops kidnapping. From poverty to heroism. Mary Johnson's remarkable story." The phone rang constantly. Ruth unplugged it after the 20th call from a reporter. Then came the knocks on their door. Journalists offering money for exclusive interviews, producers pitching TV specials, even a book agent suggesting a memoir. John arranged for private security to keep the media at bay, but he couldn't stop the invitations. Morning shows wanted Mary as a guest. The mayor wanted to present her with a key to the city. Scholarships were offered from prestigious schools across the country. "It's too much," Ruth said, sorting through the pile of messages. "She's just a child." But Mary was already being transformed into something else. A symbol, a story, a brand. 3 days after the tower incident, Mary returned to school. A banner hung in the hallway. Biscayne Academy celebrates our hero, Mary Johnson. In class, her teacher asked her to describe what happened. "We're all so proud of you, Mary. You're an inspiration to everyone." Some classmates wanted autographs. Others whispered behind her back. During lunch, Mary checked her school tablet and found dozens of new messages in the class chat group. They only let her in because she's Evans's charity case. Bet she made the whole thing up for attention. Why does a poor black girl get all this fame just for speaking Spanish? Mary closed the app, her appetite gone. That afternoon, a group of older students cornered her in the hallway. "My dad says Evans is just using you for publicity," one boy said. "Nobody from Little Havana gets into this school without connections." "I earned my place," Mary replied quietly. "Sure you did," the boy smirked. "The millionaire's pet." A week later, a sleek woman in a designer suit sat in their living room. Diane Winters, executive producer for National Morning America, crossed her legs and smiled at Mary. "We're thinking of a special segment," she explained. "Mary's story, from barrio to hero. We'll trace your journey, interview your teachers, show how you've overcome adversity." "That sounds very generous," Ruth said cautiously. "We'd also like to establish a fund in Mary's name," Diane continued, "for immigrant families and language education. Your story has touched so many hearts, Mary. We can use that momentum to help others." Mary perked up at this. "Really? You could help families like Luis's?" "Luis?" Diane asked. "My friend from the bodega. His family is from Guatemala. His papa doesn't have papers." Diane's smile tightened slightly. "Well, immigration is complicated, but yes, we want to highlight how language barriers affect communities." After she left, Mary felt hopeful for the first time since the tower. Maybe all this attention could be useful after all. The raid happened at dawn on a Tuesday. Mary was helping Mr. Ortiz unpack a delivery when she heard shouting outside. Through the bodega window, she saw ICE agents surrounding the apartment building across the street, where Luis and his family lived. "No," she whispered, dropping a can of beans. She ran outside despite Mr. Ortiz calling after her. Luis stood on the sidewalk, crying as agents led his father away in handcuffs. His mother clutched his little sister, begging in broken English for someone to explain. "Luis!" Mary called, running toward them. Luis looked up, his face streaked with tears. "They came for Papa," he sobbed. "They said someone reported undocumented workers in the building." Mary felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The neighborhood had never attracted this kind of attention before. Not until she became news. Not until reporters started describing Little Havana as the home of child hero Mary Johnson, and camera crews started filming B-roll of the streets and buildings. "It's my fault," she whispered. That evening, Mary called Diane Winters. "You have to help Luis's father," she pleaded. "He's being deported. He hasn't done anything wrong. He works 3 jobs to support them." "Mary, sweetheart, that's terrible," Diane said. "But immigration cases are very difficult." "You said you wanted to help immigrant families," Mary insisted. "I'll do your special. I'll say whatever you want on camera. I'll tell the whole story again, but please, help stop the deportation." A pause. "Let me see what we can do." For the next week, Mary cooperated with everything National Morning America requested. Pre-interviews, photo shoots, walking tours of her neighborhood. She answered the same questions over and over, smiled when told to smile, even wore the outfit they selected for the taping. "We're working on Luis's father's case," Diane assured her. "Our legal team is making calls. We've scheduled your segment for next Thursday. You'll make a special appeal on air." Mary dared to hope. She visited Luis every day, promising that her TV friends were going to fix everything. "Really?" Luis asked, eyes wide. "They can bring Papa back." "They have to," Mary said firmly. "That's what heroes do." The call came Wednesday night. Mary was reviewing the script for her TV appearance when Ruth answered her phone. Mary watched her mother's face fall. "I see," Ruth said. "Yes, I understand. I'll tell her." Ruth set the phone down slowly. "Mary, honey, what happened?" "Luis's father, he was deported this afternoon. The lawyers couldn't stop it." Mary stared at her mother. "But the show is tomorrow. Diane said—" "Diane just called to cancel the segment," Ruth said gently. "She said without the father here, there's no resolution to the story, no happy ending to film." Something broke inside Mary. The script fell from her hands, pages scattering across the floor. "They never cared," she whispered. "They just wanted a good story." The phone rang again. Ruth answered, then held it out. "It's John." Mary took the phone. "They deported Luis's papa," she said, voice flat. "The TV people canceled everything." "I'm so sorry, Mary," John replied. "I can hire lawyers." "It's too late," Mary shouted suddenly. "He's already gone, and it's because of me, because I became your hero and brought cameras to our neighborhood." "Mary, that's not—" "You're using me too," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "Everyone wants the little black girl who speaks Spanish and saves rich men. Nobody cares about Luis or his papa or anyone else who needs help." She threw the phone across the room. Ruth reached for her, but Mary pushed past her and ran to their bedroom, slamming the door. She collapsed onto her bed, sobs racking her small body. "Heroes are supposed to save everyone," she whispered into her pillow. "Heroes don't fail." 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived from Young Heroes of America. Inside was an invitation to their annual televised ceremony in New York, along with a script for Mary's introduction and acceptance speech. Ruth placed it on the table where Mary sat doing homework. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. Mary read the script, her expression unreadable. Every word was polished, inspirational, describing a perfect little hero who never failed, never doubted, never hurt anyone. "I'll go," she said finally. "Are you sure? After everything that happened with Luis's father, I'm sure." Mary folded the script carefully and placed it in her backpack. Inside, where no one could see, she felt hollow. The girl described in that script wasn't her. That girl didn't exist. But she would pretend. One more time. The backstage area of the Young Heroes of America ceremony buzzed with activity. Technicians adjusted lights. Producers spoke urgently into headsets. And 7 children in formal attire waited nervously in the wings. Each had a story. The boy who pulled his neighbor from a burning house. The girl who raised thousands for cancer research. The twins who invented a water filtration system. And Mary Johnson, the little black girl who saved a millionaire. Twice. Mary stood apart from the others, smoothing the skirt of her new blue dress. The script in her hands was creased from constant folding and unfolding. She'd memorized every word, the carefully crafted narrative that mentioned her bravery and John's gratitude, but nothing about Luis's father or the cameras that had invaded her neighborhood. 5 minutes, heroes! A production assistant called cheerfully, "Remember your marks and your talking points." Ruth adjusted Mary's collar, concern etched in her face. "You don't have to do this, baby. We can still walk away." "I know, Mama." Mary's voice was quiet, but steady. John stood nearby, uncomfortable in his tuxedo. He'd flown them to New York on his private jet, arranged their hotel, tried to make everything perfect. But he couldn't fix the hollowness in Mary's eyes. "Whatever you decide to say up there," he said, crouching to her level, "I'm proud of you." Mary nodded, not quite meeting his gaze. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Señora Rivera. "Remember, mija, listening is also courage, but sometimes speaking your truth is the bravest thing of all." Mary took a deep breath. The stage manager appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mary Johnson, you're up next. Ready?" The lights were blinding. Mary squinted as she walked to center stage, the applause washing over her like a wave. A giant screen behind her showed footage from both rescues. Mary blocking John's car, Mary emerging from the Horizon Tower. The host, a famous actress with a dazzling smile, placed a hand on Mary's shoulder. "Ladies and gentlemen, our youngest honoree tonight, Mary Johnson." More applause. Mary stepped to the podium, barely tall enough to reach the microphone. The teleprompter lit up with her script, the words glowing blue in the darkness. "Thank you for this honor," she began, reading dutifully. "When I heard those men speaking Spanish, I knew I had to act." The words felt hollow, disconnected from the knot in her chest. She saw Ruth and John in the front row, watching anxiously. Behind them, hundreds of faces, strangers who thought they knew her story. Mary stopped reading. The teleprompter continued to scroll, but she looked away from it. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small but clear. "I can't read this." A murmur rippled through the audience. The host took a half step forward, then hesitated. "My name is Mary Johnson," she continued, finding her own words. "I'm 8 years old, and I'm scared, right now." The murmur quieted. In the control booth, producers frantically whispered into headsets. "Everyone calls me a hero because I speak Spanish and I saved Mr. Evans. But I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. I've failed people I care about." Mary switched to Spanish, her voice growing stronger. "Mi amigo Luis perdió a su padre hace 3 semanas. Lo deportaron. Yo traté de ayudar, pero no pude hacer nada." She translated for the audience. "My friend Luis lost his father 3 weeks ago. They deported him. I tried to help, but I couldn't do anything." In the front row, Ruth pressed a hand to her mouth. John sat perfectly still. "When I first learned Spanish from Señora Rivera, I thought it was amazing to understand words other people couldn't. But understanding another language doesn't make you magic. It just means you hear more pain." Mary looked directly into the camera now. "After Luis's father was deported, I hated my Spanish. I hated being on TV. I hated being called a hero. Because heroes are supposed to save everyone, right? That's what the stories say." She paused, gathering courage. "But that's not true. Real heroes fail sometimes. They get scared. They make mistakes. And then they keep trying anyway." The audience was completely silent now. Even the producers had stopped whispering. "I want to thank my mother, Ruth, who works 3 jobs and still finds time to braid my hair every morning. I want to thank Señora Rivera, who taught me that words matter. And I want to thank John Evans, who could have just said thank you and walked away, but didn't." Mary took a deep breath. We don't need more heroes for TV. We need more translators in hospitals so people understand their doctors. We need more social workers who speak 2 languages. We need more community advocates who listen to the people no one else hears. She stepped back from the microphone, suddenly aware of how quiet the theater had become. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, someone stood, then another, and another. The applause built gradually until the entire audience was on their feet, many wiping tears from their eyes. Ruth rushed onto the stage, wrapping Mary in her arms. Over her mother's shoulder, Mary saw John standing with the others, his face a mixture of pride and something deeper, respect. For the first time in weeks, Mary felt the knot in her chest loosen. She had told the truth. Backstage was chaos. Producers with tight smiles informed Ruth that Mary had violated her agreement. The host tried to smooth things over, calling the speech refreshingly authentic. Reporters clamored for interviews. Through it all, Mary felt strangely peaceful. She had said what needed to be said. That night, her phone exploded with notifications. The speech had gone viral, not as cute content, but as something raw and real. Some commenters attacked her, calling her ungrateful or claiming she'd been coached. But others were deeply moved. This child just said what we've all been thinking about performative heroism. As a translator in a community clinic, thank you, Mary, for seeing us. My family was separated by deportation, too. This little girl gets it. Mary turned off her phone and slept better than she had in weeks. 17 years later. The court recognizes interpreter Johnson. Mary, now 25, nodded to the immigration judge. Her braided hair was styled in a neat updo, her posture professional but approachable. Beside her sat a teenage boy and his mother, both clutching documents and looking terrified. Mrs. Ramirez is requesting asylum based on documented threats to her family, Mary translated smoothly from Spanish. Her son Miguel has been enrolled in school here for 3 years and maintains a 3.8 GPA. The hearing continued for an hour, Mary bridging the gap between legal jargon and the family's simple, powerful story. No words were lost, no nuances missed. When the judge finally granted their petition, the mother collapsed in tears, clutching Mary's hand. "Gracias," she whispered. "Nadie nos escuchaba hasta que llegaste tú." Thank you. No one listened to us until you came. That's what I'm here for, Mary replied in Spanish, squeezing her hand. As the courtroom emptied, Mary gathered her notes. A voice from the back row caught her attention. "You were excellent in there." John Evans stood by the door, his hair now silver at the temples, lines etched around his eyes. He still wore expensive suits, but carried himself with a quieter confidence than the developer who had once dismissed a little girl blocking his car. "John," Mary smiled, "I didn't know you were coming. I was in D.C. for a housing committee meeting. Thought I'd stop by." He gestured to the now empty chairs. "That family has a future because nothing got lost in translation." They walked together into the hallway, their relationship long since evolved from savior and saved to something like family, complicated, imperfect, but enduring. "The community center expansion is almost finished," John said. "The language education program can start next month if you're still interested in directing it." "I am," Mary nodded, "though I'll need to balance it with my court schedule." They reached the building's entrance, sunlight streaming through the glass doors. John paused. "You know, I never properly thanked you." "For saving your life?" Mary raised an eyebrow. "You've thanked me many times, John." "Not for that," he smiled. "For that speech, for showing me what real courage looks like." Before Mary could respond, a small voice interrupted them. "Excuse me? Are you the translator lady?" A young girl, no more than 7, stood clutching her backpack straps. Her eyes were wide, anxious. "I am," Mary said, kneeling to the child's level just as John had once knelt to hers. "Can I help you?" The girl glanced around, then leaned closer. "I heard my dad and his boss talking in Spanish last night about my mom's case. Nobody believes me when I tell them what they said." Mary felt a familiar tug of recognition, the weight of words overheard, the burden of understanding what others missed. She smiled gently at the child. "I believe you," she said. "Tell me exactly what you heard." As the girl began to whisper, Mary caught John's eye over the child's shoulder. They shared a look of quiet understanding. No spotlight, no cameras, just the simple act of listening that had started everything. This was Mary's real legacy, not the dramatic rescues that had made headlines, but the countless quiet moments helping others be heard. The circle was complete. The girl who had once overheard a deadly plot in Spanish was now helping another child find her voice.